Okay. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited to have Samuel and Dr. Alibhai. We are talking, and Samuel, I'm probably going to say your last name wrong, which is why I didn't say it, but could you maybe say it so that we can?
Yes. So just think of being late for school. So my last name is Leite.
Late. Oh, I would have definitely messed that up. So I'm glad that I asked. Okay, so we have Samuel Leite and Dr. Shabbir Alibhai with us today. This is a session with Salam Foundation. And today we're focusing on caregiving, which is a really important topic for many of us. Samuel, if we could just move to the next slide. Most of you have heard of Salam Foundation. It's a not-for-profit and has a strong focus on mental wellness and health. And I think caregiving is something that falls nicely in this place. Sajida Habib is the founder of Salam Foundation. Unfortunately, she's not able to join us today, but she will be watching this because she was very excited about this. So, and my name is Farhana Das Mohammed. So Dr. Shabbir Alibhai is a geriatric medicine specialist at the University Health Network. He's a professor at the University of Toronto, and his research interests are in cancer in older adults and in religious bioethics, which sounds really fascinating. Samuel Leite is a registered social worker supporting the outpatient geriatric services at Toronto Rehab Institute at the University Center. He has a combination of over 20 years of experience supporting older adults and caregivers. And so he's got a lot of knowledge and lived experience on how to help caregivers and what to expect. We have a lot of people online today. So what I'm going to suggest, if you've been with us in the past, you will have noticed that we do ask sometimes for you to unmute your mic and ask questions. In this particular case, because we have a lot of people joined, we will ask if you have any questions or if you have any comments to please write it in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat and we'll be watching for your questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Samuel and Dr. Alibhai. I put myself on mute and let's get started.
Perfect. So I'd like to welcome everyone today for our session. We'll go quickly back to the front. Our hope today is to provide practical strategies to minimize caregivers' burnout, stress, and compassion fatigue. We'll define that very shortly and kind of explain what that looks like and provide a way of finding some practical strategies on a day-to-day basis that caregivers can follow through. So I have some questions for everyone, and my ask of everyone is please put your response in the chat. Question is, what comes to mind when you hear terms such as double duty caregiving, dual caregiving, and one very common is the sandwich generation? So if people can put their response in the chat.
I think people are thinking very hard, typing away furiously, probably. Oh, there we go. Samuel, can you see it, the chat, or would you like me to read them out for you?
Would you mind reading them out? So
not at all. So there's one that says looking after elderly family and children at the same time.
Perfect.
Caring for older and younger generations.
Perfect.
And other stuff is coming in slowly.
So I wanted to define the first one, double duty caregiving. I think it's one that's less known and less common, but I also think because of COVID-19, it's important to understand that within the healthcare profession, so we're talking about nurses, doctors, these individuals that go out and support other individuals, that double duty caregiving are those individuals who provide care both at the home and at work. So these are individuals that, they're out in the community, they're supporting our loved ones, but when they get home, they're supporting their parents, they're supporting their kids. So it's a constant 24-hour level of care and support. Where when we're looking at dual caregiving and the sandwich generation, very similar, though this applies to all of us. We're looking at a generation of people responsible for bringing up their own children and for the care of their aging parents, which, for example, many have said in the chat. So 100%. So sometimes you hear caregiving is both rewarding and stressful. So my question to the audience is, what comes to your mind when you hear a statement such as that? So caregiving is both rewarding and stressful. So if people can put their thoughts in the chat.
Someone's saying, yes, it is. It's true, but it's also a duty. Okay.
So then my last question to everyone is then, why are you a caregiver?
I think one person saying it's a duty, maybe people feel that it's their duty to do. Oh, because I care. Okay. Helping someone makes you feel purposeful, but it's stressful because you have your own family too. Yeah. So if it's a parent, maybe they're staying with them. So it's almost expected. Religious expectations, encouragement.
So it sounds like, and I see the numbers going up, so that's great. So it sounds like there's a component of you want to give back. There's a level of fulfillment. There's a level of joy. There's a purpose in it, but also recognizing it can be very challenging. There's a lot of balancing acts back and forth and supporting your loved one, but also keeping your own health and well-being in mind as well. So I think before we go anywhere else, I want to kind of go into some stats or some statistics. So the Ontario Caregivers Organization did a spotlight report, and I like it because it's looking at information specifically around the last 3 years of the pandemic and what they have uncovered or insights that they have seen with caregivers that they have reached out to and spoken to. So what they found was that 2/3 have experienced feelings of helplessness, burnt out, and find it difficult to continue their caregiving responsibilities. What they also found out was that 1 in 4, oops, I think I sorry, 1/3 are spending about 10 or more hours a week providing physical or emotional support to someone in their life. And that 1/3 are experiencing barriers to accessing the supports they need. And that could be simple things as meals, could be personal care. And 1/3 are worried about losing their jobs because of their caregiving responsibilities. So caregiving is not, you can't put it away after 2 hours. You know, it's not like the nice uncle that comes and spends some time with the nephews and nieces and then can go away and it's left with the parents to deal with. It's a 24-hour responsibility. And additionally, 1 in 4 responsibilities have become more difficult since the easing of the COVID-19 restrictions. And that one last point is that 1 in 4 mental health has worsened compared to in the midst of while the pandemic was happening and all the restrictions. So why is this important? So this is important for many reasons. It gives us perspective. It allows us to kind of see what's currently happening out there. And when we know what the problem is, we're able to kind of look back and see, okay, what can we do to support our caregivers to help them? But I think before we go down a strategies perspective or look at, I think it's important to also understand what caregivers burnout is and what compassion fatigue is as well. So what is caregivers burnout? And that's my question to the group here. If you can add in the chat, what do you think caregivers burnout is?
Samuel, while people are typing, I just want to add one more point to the points that you made from the Spotlight report, which is as the demands for care and the demands for health services have gone up in the pandemic, sadly, at the same time, the supply of those services has not remained static or expanded. In some ways, it's contracted. The professional caregiving community, whether personal support workers, nurses, other support services, they have reduced in numbers. Some people have become sick or have left the workforce. And so there's been some contraction. So it's like a double hit.
No, that's a scary point. Okay,
Yeah, it
going
is
back
very
to,
frightening.
yeah, going back to the question, what is caregiver burnout? We've got a few people who've typed in. So they're saying when people get so frustrated, they can't think straight. The fact that you have to make their pain and discomfort, you can't make their pain and discomfort any easier. The expense and the burden for private care. You get tired and stressed, anxiety, despondency, stress of the unknown.
So I think going back to the point where we said caregiving is both rewarding and stressful, I think it's important to also note that it's natural to have feelings of anger, frustration, being exhausted, feeling alone, feeling sad. Those are things that happen to all of us. Even the best of individuals will have these feelings, and so it's important to realize these are normal feelings to have. But it's also important to realize when do we need to have, when should we seek help? When should we seek support? So thank you for those responses. In a sense, it occurs when a caregiver feels that physically, emotionally, and I double here, but exhausted, often leading to changes in attitudes from a positive. So this, you did caregiving because you want to, this is something you're happy and passionate about. But if it starts to become, has negative connotations, then it becomes a concern. And that's something that we need to look into. So what is compassion fatigue? So compassion fatigue is an extreme state of tension and stress that can result in feelings of hopelessness, indifference, pessimism, and overall disinterest in other people's issues. So why is this dangerous? So my question to everyone here, if you can also add in the chat, why is caregivers burnout, compassion fatigue? Why should we be alarmed? Why should we be concerned?
And while people are chatting or typing, sorry, I'm just going to say one of the last responses to the previous question was which is interesting, is it's more difficult when it's a spouse and they're extra demanding and short fused. So I think that actually could refer to more than just the spouse.
Absolutely, because we'll come to this a little later in terms of there are many factors that can increase the likelihood of burnout, and some of those can be managed better. For example, if the person who needs care is dealing with poorly managed pain, or they're having difficulties managing their medical conditions, or they have progressive dementia and they're having various symptoms, these things can make it even harder for the caregiver to provide care. And so when we think about caregiver burnout and compassion fatigue, we need to not only think about the circumstances around the caregiver, but the circumstances around the patient or the loved one that they're caring for. We may need to help both to help that relationship, because it really is a dyadic relationship of the two.
Yeah, they become a
And
very
sometimes
hopeless situation.
Sorry, I was going to say, sometimes by resolving the issue with the client, you then lessen the issues with the caregiver's burnout and fatigue. So I think that 100%, those two work hand in hand, and you can't see one without the other.
Yeah. And just going back to the why is it dangerous, we have a lot of people responding. They're saying it's can lead to elder abuse, can have a mental breakdown. It can harm your own health. If the caregiver is burnt and is hopeless and indifferent, does this caregiver now need to take care of themselves? Physical and mental burnout. So
I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I think the big part here is that resentment piece, something that we once did with a lot of joy. We don't want it to get to a point where there's resentment. We don't want to lose the dignity of the human being, both the caregiver and the person. We don't want to start seeing this as a burden, as something you want to run away from. So I think these are key components, key terms that I think it's important for us to know. Why? So that we can recognize when and if we're going to that point. And then the question is, what do we do from there? So here are some things I'd like to show. I'm not going to go through them all, but it's signs of caregiver stress and burnout. These are our points. These are items that I think all of us need to look at and recognize and see. So, as caregivers, you may be so focused on your loved one that you don't realize that your own health and well-being is suffering because of that. So when you start to potentially look at or start to feel things like feeling tired very often, getting too much sleep or not enough sleep, feeling sad, headaches, listen to your body. This is a time where you do need to start to do something about it. So caregiver stress and burnout. So my question to the team here or to the participants here is, how do you manage your caregiving role?
Can you
So how
clarify?
do you,
Yeah, can you clarify that a bit, Samuel, in terms
I'm
of
going
what
to
you mean
clarify.
by
So
the role?
so what do you do to prevent yourself from getting to that level of feeling stressed or burnt out? What are some strategies? What are some tactics that you do to prevent this from happening to you?
Yeah, we've got 100 people on the call, and I'm sure there's many people who have gone through this and have figured some of the stuff out for themselves. So we've got boundaries, keeping emotional, physical boundaries, setting space and time aside for yourself. Get extra help from other people in the family. Seek help from family. Prayer is my go-to for stress relief. So spirituality, prayer, share with others.
Those are some really great points, particularly around the fact that we want to share the burden and at the same time share the joys, because there are still joys in caregiving, but to try and share the responsibility where feasible, and also share what we're going through, because one of the challenges is when you feel so alone and overwhelmed, it becomes much more difficult to see a way out. When you start to share what you're feeling and going through, you realize that you're not alone and there's other people out there who care. They may not be able to help other than to listen, but often they can help. And that's really important, is to keep the conversation going, as they say, so that you're not alone and that you're talking to people and getting help for yourself, and recognizing there's a lot of resources out there and we don't all know about them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's someone who's saying there is some stigma in asking for help. So maybe, I don't know if you're going to cover that, but that's a really important point, I think. Also, people might feel they can't ask for help.
It's also could be a cultural component. There's so much to that, and it's also, I've worked with caregivers where it's not necessarily a stigma. But if I say I need help, that means I'm failing. But you're not failing. Yes. I've worked with enough caregivers and clients to realize at the end of the day, those who seek help, those who ask for help, do a lot better than those who do this by themselves. Because I think what I'd like to actually go into, before we even go to that part, I think what's important is remember that if you don't care for yourself, you won't be able to care for anyone else. That's a statement that I want to make clear, because I want to give you this example. So when you're flying on an airplane, the flight attendant does the following instructions that that you need to put your oxygen mask on you first before helping others. And the question I can pose, and there's no need to respond, but think about it, is why is it important for the flight attendant to tell you that if the mask comes down, you need to help yourself first before you can put the mask on someone else? So the idea here is that if you run out of oxygen yourself, you can't help anyone else with their oxygen mask. So you can't be trying to help your loved one and not taking the time to care for yourself. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job. But it's preparing you to be able to have the strength, the stamina, the support to be able to then, do the same for your loved one. So I want to talk about some strategies for dealing with caregiver stress. And I think what's important here is, my hope is to leave here not just throwing a whole bunch of stats, but to really look at, so what can we do collectively to support that? So accept help, accept help, accept help. I think that is the biggest point that I can stress here. It is so to be prepared with a list of ways that others can help you, and let the helpers choose what he or she would like to do. So for example, a friend may offer to take a person you care for on a walk a couple of days during a week, or a friend or family member may be able to run an errand, pick up groceries, for example, or even do some cooking for you. Be open to that, ask for that, embrace that. focus on what you are able to provide. So it's normal to feel guilty sometimes, but understand that no person is perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect caregiver. I wish there was, but there isn't. Believe that you are doing the best you can and make the best decisions you can at that given time. So today's decision is the best decision you can. Tomorrow it might change, and that's fine. Embrace that and accept that. The next one is set realistic goals. So break larger tasks into smaller steps that you can do one at a time. So, make lists, establish a daily routine. What I like to say to my clients is create a calendar Monday to Sunday. And each day, give yourself a task or two, things that need to be done. Engage your loved one in that task as well. Make it meaningful, but also make it fun. Add maybe Wednesday, you're going to go out for a good walk, or if you used to enjoy a movie, that's what you're going to be doing. That's going to help. And that's going to encourage a positive relationship. And feel comfortable also saying no to requests that are draining. We just passed the holiday season, and maybe, stop hosting that big lunch, that big dinner. It's a lot of work. It's 3 or 4 hours. It's 5 hours. Maybe it's a whole day. Maybe it's now time for someone else to take on that responsibility.
Even at a more concrete level than that, or a more day-to-day level, Samuel, I don't know what your experience is, I find many caregivers are still trying to run the household while looking after their loved one. And all the vacuuming and cleaning and dealing with the laundry and cooking and so on, it's all important part of our lives, but we can't do it all. And so sometimes some things are easier to give up than others, in order to be able to focus on those things that are the highest priority, because we can't do all. And I think until we acknowledge that, we become trapped in this vicious cycle of unrealistic expectations and inability to meet them, and then we feel guilty and depressed.
Yeah, 100%.
There was an interesting point that somebody made in the chat that I want to get your thoughts on, Samuel, which was, it's a privacy issue sometimes where you don't want to reach out or ask for help or even accept help. And so, what are your thoughts on that, and how you respond to that?
Privacy?
Yeah, that maybe the caregiver is not willing to ask for help or accept help because of concerns about privacy, letting other people into their lives and the lives of their loved ones, for whatever reason.
So I've encountered this, I should say, many times within community where social workers will try to go in and support individuals, and they won't tell you what's happening because they're very private. And I think what's important is continuing to interact, engage, not about I want to help you, but more like friend-based, and slowly building that trust, building that confidence, with the hope that over time you can get them to open up to you and say, I need help. Not in a forceful way, but in a way of letting them know that you're there, and letting them know that you are open to support in any way that they feel would be helpful.
No, I really like that. And the other thing I was going to add to that, around your realistic goals, I think we also have to be realistic that if we want, there's certain priorities we have that we may need to reassess, that if we really want to keep everything in the family and we don't want to pay for things, or we don't want outside people coming in, that decision, while I respect that, it has its costs. And we may not be able to sustain that. And it may not be possible to have 100% privacy and still request help. And so one has to acknowledge that there are sometimes trade-offs, but that people who don't want to even acknowledge that or think about it are much higher risk of burnout, because they're basically shutting out any other possibility. And that really sets up a situation that becomes untenable.
And I hear sometimes people use the word, well, I'm very independent. I'm very independent. I have always been independent. I have learned in my 20 plus years of practice that there are two types of individuals. There's those who are fiercely independent, and then there's those who seek help. Those who are fiercely independent, unfortunately, don't always have the positives in their lives because of that. But those who slowly start to gradually accept help and support. I'm not suggesting, you turn your life upside down, but one little bit of help, an hour here, an hour there, tend to live better quality of life than those who are fiercely independent and don't accept the supports.
I'll just add one thing that triggered when you guys were talking, was that sometimes the person who is getting the care is the one who's resisting anyone else to help them, except for the person who they've kind of gotten comfortable with. So have you come across that?
Many times.
Very much so.
Many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say that that's 99.9% of our work is working with individuals. And what we've tried to do, it doesn't always work, is slowly introduce these individuals as friends and building that support and that confidence, to the point that sometimes, individuals will like these individuals, and we'll let them slowly open up. But again, it's not going from, bring the person in, personal care. It takes a long time for that.
One of the
Maybe
other
it's like,
important things, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe it's concrete, like, tasks. So maybe they just come for this one thing and then they leave, and then you start getting used to them.
Yeah, you're getting your foot in the door. But one of the other things that I find sometimes helpful, and like Samuel, it doesn't always work, but trying to explore what the issues or concerns are from the patient who doesn't want other people, but also trying to provide them information and education so that they understand that the people providing care to them are human, they're imperfect, they have their own needs, they have their own health, and that they will suffer, and then the patient will suffer, because the caregiver and the patient will then both become sick. It doesn't always work, but that's one of the important things I try to emphasize, because the more caregiving you are providing, the less time you are spending looking after yourself. And as Samuel was saying earlier, people can suffer physically and mentally. And while it's fine to say that, I'm the patient and I expect my family to look after me, et cetera, it's like, yes, that may be true, but it cannot come at all costs. And one needs to be realistic and really understand the incredible amount of sacrifice people make to be able to provide the care they do. And they can't do everything in all situations.
Yeah.
Doesn't always
I'm
work.
just gonna, just a quick time check. We're at half an hour. So just getting that. And then I know you're going to come to this, but just acknowledging there's a couple of people who have asked for resources, and because the caregivers sometimes don't know where to go to help. We're going to talk about it. So just hang on until we get there.
For sure. That's a really important one. And we've got some slides on that. So back to you, Samuel.
We won't leave you hanging 100%. So continue on, get connected. So find out about caregiver resources in your community. Many communities have classes specifically about the illness your loved one is facing. So for example, if you're helping someone with dementia, there's places like the Alzheimer's Society. That's a great resource. If it's Parkinson's, there's lists and lists of supports that are available. Caregiving services such as transportation, Meals on Wheels, or delivery of meals, homemaking support as well. These are all available. Yes, I understand that some might have costs, but some also have low cost. And those are things that could be looked into and investigated and found. This one I will stress as well is join a support group. What a support group does is it helps to normalize, validate, and encourage you. And it also provides sometimes problem-solving strategies for difficult situations. What I mean with that is, so for example, we spoke earlier about, it's more challenging when it's a husband and wife, or a couple, I should say, when it's a couple, because you can't just walk away. And so sometimes having other individuals help to normalize the situation and find strategies that worked for them, it may also be able to work for you as well. And so people in support groups understand what you may be going through. And a support group can also be a good place to create meaningful relationships and friendships from as well. Seek social support, so make efforts to stay well connected with your family and friends. Please, please, please do not stop seeing your best friend who you used to go see on Wednesday for 30 minutes for a coffee. These are just as important as caring for your loved one. You need that for your own mental health, for your own engagement, and for your ability to go out and enjoy, your life as well. And set aside time for each week for connection. And even if it's just a walk in your neighborhood by yourself or with your loved one, if that's something that's important for you, you need to put it in. And I think it goes back to my comment about that weekly calendar. Physically put something in the calendar that says today on Wednesday at 2:00, this is what I'm going to be doing for myself. Set personal health goals. Please keep in mind your health is just as important as your loved one. So set goals to establish a good sleep routine if you're not sleeping well. Find time to be physically active on most days of the week. So it goes back to that calendar, add something there. Eat a healthy diet and drink plenty of water, 100% water. Many caregivers have issues with sleep, which I had made note. Not getting quality sleep over a long period of time can cause health issues. So if you have trouble getting a good night's sleep, I highly recommend that you speak with your doctor. And then there are many, many, many ways out there to support you. I'm going to throw this one then to Dr. Alibhai, is see a doctor. Why should we see a doctor?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a really important point because we need to think about both the caregiver who may need to explore their own health issues, make sure they're getting their regular health prevention and promotion, whether it's cancer screening or getting their blood tests, getting their medications for their medical conditions, etc., and making sure that if they have any symptoms that these are being appropriately investigated, not I'll deal with it later. And at the same time, also thinking about seeing a doctor for the patient, because there may be patients who are suffering more and having more needs from caregivers because their own health conditions are not well managed. Whether it's, as I mentioned earlier, whether the patient may be depressed and therefore able to do less for themselves, whether they're in pain, because when patients are in pain, everybody else is in pain around them. And so things like that can be managed better to be able to improve the care for both the patient as well as the caregiver. And so thinking about optimizing the health of both patient and caregiver is a huge issue. I see a lot of patients with dementia, right? So almost 1/2 of my practice is older adults with dementia, and there are huge caregiver issues there. And many times those caregiver challenges get exacerbated because as patients get progressive dementia, some or many of them will have various behaviors or symptoms. And these often require management with advice and counseling, but sometimes medications that can help the patient's symptoms to get better, which can make it easier for the caregiver to provide care. And so seeing a doctor for both the patient and the caregiver can really help.
Perfect. And the last one that I like to put, and it's not a shameless self-promotion, is see a social worker or a counselor. I think what a social worker may be able to meet with you and discuss what community supports or resources are available. I know myself, when I meet with clients, I do ask a lot of questions, but there's reasons for those questions. You know, I'll ask about falls, I'll ask about what they enjoy doing, what are they currently doing socially, and to try to find a holistic view of what's best for that particular client and the caregiver, and to see what resources in the community might best support them. And it could be something as simple as linking them with meal services, linking them with a fall detection system because they're wandering or they're at higher risk for falls. I think a social worker can provide a lot of resources and support. So I would highly recommend not just the doctor, but also seek out a social worker as well.
Do you think sometimes people feel defensive talking to a social worker? They might feel like they not doing such a great job in their own mind, and then they don't want to really I wonder if that's an issue that comes up.
I think it's an issue where at the end of the day, there are some great social workers, and there are some social workers that might still be, as I like to use the word, green, still new to the field, might not know what all the resources are available. So my ask for people is be patient, work with them. But at the end of the day, we take this field wanting to help individuals, wanting to help caregivers, wanting to help clients as well. And you know, if one doesn't work, seek out another.
There is a stigma in mental health, particularly of not wanting to, seek out help for mental illness for themselves, for example, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. I think there is a little bit of a stigma sometimes in not wanting to see a social worker, but it's much less, I have found, than the stigma of not wanting to see a psychologist or psychiatrist for mental health issues. And I think over time it is improving, sadly, partly because COVID has made everything more stressful. And so people are sort of finally beginning to realize the need. But I think seeing a social worker is huge. I've been in this field for 25 years, and I regularly consult my social workers to find those resources and provide advice and support to patients and families. They're incredible, and the field is always changing. And we're going to give some practical resources. But Samuel, I'm trying to remember in our slides, I don't think we specifically talked about whether people can freely access a social worker through home care. So do you want to comment on that now, or does that come up a little later? I'm trying to remember.
I can comment now as well. So the good thing is, within the city of Toronto, there are a variety of community support agencies that have social workers that you can link into for support. Many of these actually do house calls as well. So they visit clients in their homes and assess them. Home and Community Care also has a contract with an organization called Closing the Gap that could provide temporary social work support as well. And some physicians, not all, might have links to social workers as well. So closer to the end, there will be resources, and I will highlight those where you can 100% get that support if it's something you feel would be helpful. Okay, because of time, I'm going to quickly just kind of go through some of these. So in my perspective, there is a lot of benefits around this word respite care. And there are different types available. In-home, so that could be, for example, having a personal support worker come to a person's home. They can provide companionship. They can provide nursing services, things like personal care, showering, and bathing. And the home and community care can authorize an hour or 2 or 3, depending on the need of a person. There's also community support agencies that do the same at a lower cost. And then you also have for-profit organizations that can also provide the support as well. What I highly recommend as well is an adult day program and/or centers. These are centers that offer a variety of quality activities and services. It's a safe environment and a supportive environment to individuals in the community. They could be physically frail or have some cognitive decline or impairments, or are socially isolated. And so they come together in programming with others, and it gives respite to the caregiver because they're in a center that's being saved, but it also gives the client some meaningful engagement and activity. Short stay respite care centers are places where, we all like to go on vacation to a hotel and stay away for a day or 2 or 3. So there are places where you can have your loved one stay away for a day or 2 or 3 in a place that's also supportive. Yes, there's cost to these, but for your own mental health, it might be something worth looking into, even if it's for a day or 2. I also want to talk about the caregivers' benefits, some programs from the government. So in 2022, more than half of women aged 15 and older, that's about 52%, almost 8.4 million women, provided some form of care to children and care-dependent adults. So I think that's significant and that's important. And so why is that important? Because there are government programs out there that seek to help these individuals who might need some time to care for their loved one. So I want to talk about the family caregiver leave. This is an unpaid job-protected leave, leave for employees in Ontario, and it can allow the person to step away from their job without losing their job to be able to care for their loved ones. There's also the employment insurance, the caregiver's benefit. This provides financial assistance while you're away from work to care for or support a critically ill or injured person or someone needing end-of-life care. And we can send those resources as well, so not a problem. And the Canadian Caregivers Credit. So you are going to be doing your income taxes very shortly. And if you haven't been requesting for this credit, I would 100% recommend that you do. What I also want to throw to is many people still continue to do their own income taxes, which is fine. I highly suggest to every single one of my clients to get an expert to do your income taxes, because they sometimes know about credits that you don't know, and that will help to decrease the cost of taxes that you pay each year. I think we've all kind of already stressed this, but I want to stress it again. And I think I want to get everyone to think. You can put it in the chat. We don't have to go that route, but no person is an island. And so what do you think when that comes to your mind? I think what's important to know that if you're like many caregivers, you may have a hard time asking for help. I think we all are like that. The problem is this attitude can lead to feelings of isolation, frustration, and even depression. So rather than struggle on your own, we ask you, our hope with this presentation is to take advantage of the local resources that are available to you for caregivers. So more importantly, we have 3 slides here that I'd like to share with you on some resources that I highly recommend you seek out. If you are caring for someone with cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, dementia, any of those diagnoses, I highly recommend that you seek out the Alzheimer's Society. They have counselors who can speak with you, who can provide resources, provide counseling. There are support groups. There are support groups for yourself, caregivers, and also for clients as well. Headspace is an app which focuses on meditation, and it helps you to center yourself, some breathing exercises. I think, for example, some people mentioned prayer, if that's important to you as well. I highly suggest those elements. I highly suggest having some time for you where you breathe in and out and just reflect on the day.
Is Headspace free?
I think Headspace might not be free. I think there's a charge for it, but there are so many, with the apps today, you can do meditation, you'll find so many different types. Meetup. This is a less known one, but Meetup was originally created for book lovers who wanted to, meet with others face to face and virtually. What I like about Meetup is like they say, it's a people platform. You can put a topic. So for example, I can put dementia, and then I can write Toronto, and you will find all the virtual and in-person groups that's specifically dealing with that topic. So this might be a good avenue to find a book club. It's a good avenue to find other people, for example, who are dealing with Parkinson's, dealing with dementia, dealing with Alzheimer's. And the one positive thing with COVID is now that it's virtual, you could be meeting people from Australia, people from Ireland, people from Mexico, and kind of see their perspectives. I think it's a great platform for that as well. And the last one on this slide is Home and Community Care. This organization, for those who don't know, provides personal care support, can help with long-term care placement, can help with physio, can help with even linking sometimes to social work support. It is 100% an organization that I would suggest people reaching out if they feel they need help for their loved one with personal care. I don't know, Dr. Alibhai, if there's any comments you want to make?
I was just going to say one quick thing. With Home and Community Care used to be called the LIN, the Local Health Integration Network, and every couple of years the government changes the name. So this is the current name of that same program of what we can commonly call home care, but HCCSS is the current name. It used to be the LIN, it used to be home care, etc.
And it also used to be CCAC, which a lot of clients of mine today still say. So yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Another 3 resources I like to add is 211. So on your phone, if you dial 211, you can call them and you can ask for any community resources. So I'd like to have a counselor. I'd like to speak with a social worker. I'd like to know information about Parkinson's. I'd like to this and that. If you dial 211, they have a directory of information and they can provide that to you. The next one is the Toronto Seniors Helpline. So if you're looking for resources for individuals 55 plus, this is a good resource. They'll let you know your sister agency, what supports is available in the community. So 100% I'd recommend taking down this information. 311 is specific to City of Toronto resources. So sometimes, when is my garbage being picked up? But also, community centers, what's available through the City of Toronto as well. And my last slide here, which is community support service agencies. So the City of Toronto is broken into different little quadrants, and each one there is a community support agency that provides a basket of services. So for example, affordable transportation, Meals on Wheels, reduced cost for personal support workers, caregiver support, social workers. And so each agency is different. Now, in order to access these services, it depends on where you live. So this website, if you go in and you key in your address, it will let you know which of the community organizations you live within. I would also recommend and highlight the Ontario Caregivers Organization. This organization has come together to specifically support caregivers and provide resources and support. And they do have a caregivers helpline, and that is the number. One last one that I almost forgot, but I wanted to make sure we put in is we can always learn new techniques, new ways of doing things, and the healthy aging and geriatrics education is a beautiful resource. They have monthly education components similar to the ones that we're doing here right now. It is a resource I highly recommend everyone looking into. Dr. Alibhai, anything from you?
The only other resource I didn't remember earlier, Samuel, when I was looking at the slides, but I'll recommend now is the Regional Geriatric Program. And the Regional Geriatric Program, there's one throughout all of Ontario, and then each of the major cities, so Toronto, Hamilton, London, etc., they have their own Regional Geriatric Program, and it provides a series of resources, as educational materials. It tells you about nearby clinics where you can access specialized geriatric services. So it's a nice set of resources for patients and caregivers, and lots of linkages to other groups that are doing work in this space.
Perfect.
Perfect. And I'll just say one last thing. Someone's asking if the slide and resources can be sent. Because we've had people come through multiple convoluted ways. I don't know if we can reach everyone, but what I will do before the end of this session is to actually put the YouTube channel on which this recording will be uploaded within a week, so that you can take down this link and hang on to it. I will also share the link, but just to make sure that this way people can get access to it.
Is there an opportunity? Is there an email for Salam Foundation, or if people can email you, you could email them the slides, for example?
Yes, I will look into that and let you know in a bit. Yeah.
I think the last point I'd like to make for everyone is we are not perfect human beings. We have great intentions, and we do the best that we can to support our loved ones, a friend, a neighbor. And I think that's what's important. That's what's crucial. Remember, going back to that point, that we are not islands. We are social creatures and beings. I think the pandemic has shown that to us, where, we can be alone for a while, but then we start to go, crazy. It's the cabin fever feeling. And it's important to seek out help and support. And if you seek out one and it's not working out, then there's another one to try, and then there's another one to try, and keep seeking. Please don't give up. Don't abandon that. There are resources out there. Ask questions, and please keep yourselves informed.
Excellent. Yeah, this is really important. So just to go back to the question of how to get access, we have the email for Salam Foundation is online. It's on the chat. We have the YouTube channel, which has all the previous sessions, as well as within a week, you will have this session on. And we'll also be sharing the information on Instagram and Facebook for Salam Foundation. So you can go ahead and follow those, and you'll be able to get access to that. Thank you so much for this. I found this really insightful. I'm sure that the people who are on the call have also found this really insightful. There was a couple of things that came up that I just wanted to go back to just now that we do have a little bit of time. Just to let you know that Hamida Merchant was saying that they've established a Because We Care voluntary-based kind of program. So if anyone's interested, that they've put that in there in the chat. You can follow up with them. Someone's saying that and maybe this is something, if someone is alone and they've fallen and stuff like that, should they be seeing a doctor right away? I just could not ignore that one.
So it's a tricky question because there's so many medical components that we don't completely understand, or I don't completely have information on. But in general, people who have fallen, should, and particularly if they live alone, should be seeing someone soon. You'll have to see if the person cannot get up on their own off the ground after they've fallen. They're obviously going to need to call emergency services. But even if they're able to get up, if they have no injuries afterwards, then the visit could be more routine to the family doctor to get checked out, because one fall increases the risk of more falls. If you've had 2 or more falls, by definition, you're considered high risk for future falls. If it's something where someone's had bruising or other injuries that may need urgent care, even more important to seek out that care sooner rather than later. And when people are living alone, it's an opportunity to think about whether you have enough supports to you available, whether they're human or electronic, to be able to call for help if you need it. And so services like personal connect devices, Lifeline, and other companies that have them, where people can have them on their wrist or wear them around their neck. Or some people I find just have a little bag with a little cell phone, whatever, something that they can then call for help, so they're not lying there on the ground and unable to reach any kind of assistance, because that's a lot of suffering and can be sometimes fatal. We don't want people lying there on their own and not being discovered for days. And so lots of things to think about in people who've had a fall. And there are many things we can do that may help, prevent future falls. But I don't want to talk more about falls because that's not for today. But
I just could not ignore that one. Thank you very, very much. I didn't realize, but I think we had a limit of how many people could join. So there was a few folks who have reached out to me to say that they were trying to join, but they couldn't because we'd hit the 100 people limit. If you know people who have been looking to get onto this and were not able to attend today because of the limit, please share the YouTube channel with them. We will be getting the recording out there within the week. Are there any final questions on this? I know this is such a huge topic that sometimes you just don't know where to start, right? But I think we've covered a whole bunch of things. I'll tell you, like, the key takeaways, if I can, for people who are listening, is ask for help, accept help. It's okay. This is what I've taken away from the session today. Look at the resources, because there is help out there. Don't forget that you can actually get some financial assistance back through your taxes. That is a huge one, and I think a lot of people maybe don't know about that. So that's a big one. Talk to an accountant and see what's possible there. And I know that someone did mention that there is a reduction in the government resources available based on finances or whatever it is, but there is still a lot of information out there. There's a lot of support out there. So definitely don't think that if one route is closed doesn't mean that there isn't other routes that are open, right?
And just
Did I
one
miss
more
anything?
plug. No, I think it's a great summary. One more plug in terms of the disability tax credit. It can be retroactively applied. I have a number of patients and families who I see where the patient has had disability for years and they're eligible for the disability tax credit. You can carry it back. I don't even know if there's a limit, whether it's 6 or 7 years or there's no limit. Samuel, you might know this better than I.
Yeah, there is a limit. I just don't know how many years, but at least it's worth going to. Yeah.
That's
And
great.
I've had accountants tell patients and families, go to the doctor, get these forms signed, and you can get back thousands of dollars for some of these patients over years of being able to apply disability tax credit. So definitely worth looking into.
That's incredible. And someone just mentioned that there is a family caregiver benefits EI for adults and children. So don't forget that there could be employment insurance support that you could get. Someone saying, do we have any groups for the elders to participate in accepting help from others? Like maybe some kind of sessions they can attend that helps to normalize asking for help or receiving help or from people from who they are not maybe.
In situations like that, I'd highly recommend one-to-one sessions with a counselor or social worker versus group. Or if there's a cultural appropriate program in the area, maybe encouraging others to speak with them, because I feel like people learn and are more quicker to accept help from those who have, similar culture or similar background. So 100%. But I think having a one-to-one conversation is helpful, but to keep having those conversations in a way that's inviting and friendly and not demanding.
Yeah, I would second that. That I think one-on-one is going to be more acceptable to people than going to groups, and more opportunity to be able to actually share and be able to learn and receive information. I think in a group format, it's possible, but I think it's, for many people, it's an uncomfortable thing to put yourself out there. As it is, these people who need help and are asking for help, it's already a challenging thing enough. And then to go to a group of people who might be peers, rather than going to see someone in private and have that confidential discussion, may be very hard.
Yeah. And if you're caring for someone who has cognitive decline, and they are saying, no, we don't need help, but they can't make good decisions anymore, then sometimes the caregiver has to make some decisions to see how they can help them, right? Especially if it's a parent, you're like, okay,
well,
my mom says, or my dad says.
It's really helpful to have other family members support the main caregiver. Because if it's just a spouse, for example, saying to their loved one who has dementia that, you need more care, we need more help, whatever, then it becomes a much more difficult situation, often filled with conflict, because the person with dementia may not have the insight to understand that they need help, or they may say, well, my wife or my husband can do this for me. They've done it, all these years. I don't need anybody else. I don't want anybody else. And people can get angry and belligerent. You need support from other family members so that it's not just the husband or the wife who's talking to the other person, because then it becomes very difficult and it can become very awkward.
Can the family doctor play a role here to provide that kind of authority
They can. Sometimes it's helpful. To be honest, I find that it's very variable, a bit like what Samuel was alluding to, that some family doctors are much more open to this and have much more time and willingness to do it. I find many doctors do not, and they're overwhelmed, frankly, with dealing with all the other issues, that this, sadly, takes on a lower priority. It's not as important as managing their chest pain or their diabetes or ruling out pneumonia, but obviously it's still important.
Yes.
I would also say, though, going back a few years, is those who don't or haven't started to discuss powers of attorney for personal care and property need to start looking into those documents. You don't want to wait when the person's incapable and then therefore you can't have these documents signed, because then it will give an authorized individual the ability to support that process, help that person through. It's crucial, it's important. Wills, for example, as well, but even future care planning. So if something should happen to me and I'm in an accident and I'm not able to speak for myself, what type of care do I want? These are conversations, I know we're jumping a little bit, but these are important conversations that we need to start having with our loved ones. I remember trying to have a conversation with my mother and my brother, and my brother was like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Well, we need to talk about that because something could happen. And then I want to be able to, to do what my mother, for example, wants me to do, not what I think she wants. And then at the end, not getting it right.
Yes. I've been driving my kids crazy by telling them random things. So to that point, is there a resource that can help kind of drive that conversation, that kind of lists out the things you should be considering as you think about, because it lifts the burden off the person who's going to take care of you. If something happens to you, then they're making decisions and they're racked with guilt, or they don't know what you would have wanted, or
there's a lot of resources. I actually put together a toolkit that has a little bit of that information. So that's maybe something I can share with you. And for those who might be interested, we can share as well, where it starts to have those conversations, starts to have those topics. I think one more thing that I'd like to put to is, I think most people complete their income taxes, but some people don't. And the concerns with not doing that is you have the potential of losing some of your pensions when you don't complete your income taxes. So if there's anyone here, a caregiver or a client who hasn't had their income taxes completed for many years, I'd highly recommend making sure you put that in order, because you could be losing your gains or the OAS. So those are things that are, at the end of the day, help And I like to pitch that in as well as in our conversation.
Perfect. And Dr. Alibhai has put in the chat the organization for advanced care planning. It's called letmedecide.org. Great. Thank you so much.
And
Wow,
Samuel's got a much longer list, but that's one of the ones I like.
Perfect. Perfect. I think there is so much more we could talk about, but I'm glad that we've started to talk about this topic because too many people are feeling this, and I think it's important for us to continue. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time, for your your expertise, the resources. It's calming to hear this, and I'm not in that position of actually taking care of anyone unless you call my teenage kids that, but. But it's almost calming to know that there is so much help out there, and people might be feeling they're in a spin, and I hope that this helps them as a starting point. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we had a great crowd. Thank you all for your questions, for sharing your thoughts. I think that's what really makes this interaction meaningful. So appreciate it, everyone. And that's a wrap. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.